Welcome to another edition of the Gooner Ramble on Arsenal Fan TV podcast. I'm your host Giles, and tonight, behind enemy lines, we're talking to Chelsea FC fan, the famous @famous_CFC, otherwise known as Kristian. Good evening, Kristian.
Good evening, Giles. How are you?
Not too bad. Thanks for joining me tonight. We're both coming off the back of Champions League victories. Yourselves won 1-0 over in Lisbon, and ourselves we won 4-1 at home to Galatasaray. So I'm expecting we're both going into Sunday's game brimming with confidence. But I want to ask you what you thought of your signings in the summer. If you start with that, and then your team's progress this season. So if we'll start with the personnel that Mourinho brought in.
Well, I don't think it's really that hard to argue that Chelsea won the transfer window this summer. I mean, selling David Luiz for 50 million euros or something ridiculous like that for a luxury player who wasn't the strongest in defence, to bring in Costa, Fabregas, and Luis on the left-hand side of defence, as well as Remy, was really quite strong. So we finally looks like we've solved the striker problem we've had ever since really Drogba's star started to fade, and then obviously when he left after the Champions League final, and we've got rid of Torres. So things are starting to looking quite good on the striker front. Looks like Remy could be quite a useful backup player. And in the middle, obviously, we've bought Cesc Fabregas. He looks like he's just jumped straight back into the midfield, into the Premier League, like he'd never been away. And he looks, I think he's got a ridiculous number of assists so far in the season. And it looks like him and Costa are gonna fire us to the title.
So you sound very confident about your chances this season. Do you think you've sort of filled the extra few percent to catch up and overtake Man City?
Yeah, I think we're going to win the league by 5 points. I think Man City are obviously the closest challengers. They've got an awesome squad. It's going to be an interesting season where I think it really is going to come down to how the teams at the top compare, not really against each other so much, but how they do against the little teams. Or the mid-table teams that's going to decide this, particularly away from home.
Okay. Diego Costa has been on fire pretty much since he's arrived at Stamford Bridge. You feel that's the best 32 million you've spent in some time on a striker?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's more than a goal a game so far, isn't it? It's been absolutely awesome. Provided that he's one of those strikers that looks like he's not in the game for 20 minutes and then all of a sudden he's scored. He's got that hunger. Some of the goals he's scored, he's second favourite to win those balls, and they just looks like he's going to be the difference between last season, where we came very close, and this season.
Okay, all right. Cesc Fabregas has come back to the Premier League. He's wearing the royal blue of Chelsea. There was a lot of talk in the summer, about him coming to Arsenal. Wenger said that we've got enough players in his position. We've also got chiefly Mesut Ozil, and we didn't take up the option. Were you surprised that Arsenal didn't take up the option? Were you more surprised to actually get him?
I was more surprised that he was a player that Mourinho would want. I mean, I hadn't watched him too much apart from when we played against him in the Champions League, but I was surprised he was a player that Mourinho go in for. But he certainly is a player that's adding something to us. As for Arsenal going for him, I'm surprised Arsenal didn't go with him, given his record at Arsenal when he was there and the relationship that they had. I think maybe it was a case of not wanting to once he's gone, not wanting to sort of welcome him back and acknowledge that maybe at points you had missed him and that you'd been lacking a player of his caliber. Maybe sort of that kind of attitude from Wenger. But Yeah, I think it's a move that's made sense, and having watched him play, he looks like he's going to make a difference. Still not quite in the Mourinho mould. He's not quite as defensive as some of the other players we've got, but maybe that's what's going to be what we actually needed.
So he gives you the X factor basically going forward, in terms of dictating the play and keeping the ball. Yeah,
it's the assists. It's that vision. I mean, I think he's already got 6 or 7 assists so far this season. He's provided the link play, and he's got goals as well.
And he seems to have set Hazard free in some respects, in so much as, well, from an outsider like me looking in, it seems like Hazard isn't burdened with such responsibility of having to drive the team forward and be the chief creator. Would that be a decent assessment of?
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's less. Yeah, as you said, there's less responsibility on Hazard to be the only player that's kind of expected to drive things forward. Plus, I guess it gives defenders and of the opposition, when you've got Oscar, Fabregas, and Hazard on the same pitch, who do you give the biggest priority to? And I think that's what we're seeing when we're trying to break down the teams from lower in the league, which we struggled with last season. It seems to be that his vision is helping unlock those.
Okay, right. Let's move on to the game. Last season, you gave us a bit of a sound beating, 6-0. Were you surprised by that scoreline, by the way that the match panned out, or was it everything you expected? Did everything kind of go to plan as you expected, you reckon?
It was a pretty perfect game. If I remember, we were 3-0 up quite quickly. And that always helps coming out of the blocks. Did I expect to win 6-0? Honestly, no. As much as we joke around and we like lording it over you guys as the only teams to have won the Champions League, we've not always had. I think the time before that you did us 5-3 at the Bridge. So it's always a tough game when we've played you guys. But yeah, I think it just shows that when we get it right, we can destroy any team.
And going into this Sunday's game, how do you see that one panning out? How would your team set up? If I just ask you a question, I've got a question here from one guy. His name is @Gunner8507. He asks, how will you set up without Ramirez?
That's a good question, because in these games against the better quality sides, Ramirez is a bit of an enforcer, provides that screen, but with I think we'll play Matic, or just have that key role, and then you'll see, it'd be interesting to see which player he does choose to partner with. We go a little bit more defensive, someone like Mikel, or whether we're just going to play Fabregas and give him a little bit more responsibility. Okay, so
your back four basically is quite consistent, isn't it? You say Matic as the deep lying midfielder. You've played Fabregas in a deeper role at certain times this season. Do you see Mourinho doing that again, or as you say, do you see him playing further up the field and having that extra insurance policy of having Mikel? Because I noticed last season you played both Luis and Matic as the two sort of enforcers in midfield, and then you had the other guys sort of going forward. Is there a possibility that could happen again, or do you think he'll play with Fabregas in that deeper role, sort of dictating the pace?
I'm always hesitant to have Fabregas in that deeper role, because he has his only weakness so far playing for us has been that when we have conceded, some of those instances have been from sort of lapses from Fabregas giving the ball away a little bit too deep, and putting us on the back foot. However, I'd like to see him given more of a free role, and maybe with Mikel, or if we put Fabregas there, I guess that gives him the option of playing someone like Oscar in the middle and giving them a bit, another option to be a bit more expansive.
Okay, all right. I have another question here from @Sanmit_DS, and he says, where is the possible weakness in your current squad?
I honestly don't see one, to be honest with you. I think we're back to the sort of 2004, 2005, 2006 sort of era when we had two world-class players in every position. I mean, you mentioned the defence. How many clubs could say they've got two of the top 5 goalkeepers in Europe, if not the world, in their squad. One of those unfortunately being benched. Look at defence. Philip Luis, signed for a lot of money in the summer, has barely got a look in, despite looking fairly tidy when he's played, simply because Azpilicueta has been amazing. Ivanovic providing goals on the right. In defence, you've got John Terry, who I know defied opinion, but was the best defender in the country last season, and looks like he's carrying that on, partnered with Gary Cahill. And so, defensively solid. You look at the midfield now with Matic, who's brought so much to the team. Fabregas. You've got backups in Mikel, you've got Ramirez, you've got, and then in the more attacking-minded position, you've got Oscar, Willian, Salah, Hazard. And then up front, we've obviously got Costa, we've got Remy, and then of course we haven't even mentioned Didier Drogba, or as we like to call him, Arsene Wenger's worst nightmare.
Well, he's not going to be a nightmare on Sunday. He's not playing, is he? He's injured.
He's not, but I think we'll stick him on the side of the pitch, just off the side of Wenger's eye line, just to put the heebie-jeebies in him.
All right. Going on to Diego Costa, I'm amazed that he hasn't. I mean, he's always got a hamstring complaint, but somehow, some way, I don't know if you guys are rubbing cottage cheese on his hamstrings, or you're giving him some sort of wine, or I don't know what it is you're doing. But how is it that he makes it every game? I mean, when somebody has a sore hamstring, you tend to sort of rest them and nurse them, but he plays every game. Is there something untoward going on there in the Chelsea department, medical department? I mean, we need all the tips we can get because our own medical department is quite full, as you probably well know. So, what is it about Diego Costa's hamstrings? I mean, is it all bluff, or does he actually have sore hamstrings? Because this was going on from last season when it was at Atletico Madrid.
Yeah, well, there was that rumour at the World Cup, I don't know if you remember it, when that he was actually having treatment with things like horse placenta and crazy things like that. So maybe there's some alchemy going on. I don't know. Maybe it's the healing touch of Eva Carniera. You just can't speculate, really.
Is that the fit-looking bird in your medical team?
That's the highly qualified, attractive-looking lady in our medical team, indeed.
Yeah, I'm sure she's got healing qualities. All right. So, how do you think you set up? What's the formation?
I think we'll play roughly similar to the way we set up against Man City, to be honest with you. It's a fairly standard Mourinho tactic now. The numbers off the top of my head are eluding me, but, we'll be looking to, Costa with
Just 4-2-3-1 or something like that, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the one. Yeah.
So we might go light for light then, I'd imagine, because we generally play 4-2-3-1. I can't see us playing 4-1-4-1 with your attacking talent on display at Stamford Bridge. So I imagine it's light for light. I'm getting the vibe that you feel very cocksure about the chances on Sunday. Do you see this being a handsome victory, or sort of a hard kind of, backs to the wall sort of grind out victory, or even a draw?
Well, I guess my confidence sort of when we've played Arsenal has evolved as and since I first started going. I remember the first Chelsea Arsenal game I watched, we lost 1-0 at Stamford Bridge, and Ian Wright scored the only goal, and you always had it over us back then, and gradually as we've
got money.
Well, I did some research. Someone told me that Arsenal have broken the British transfer record 4 times. Chelsea have only done it once before we go down that road. I now feel confident when we play any opposition. I think that the way Arsenal play is going to suit us. Very few teams, and Arsenal find this as well. Very few teams come out and attack us these days, which makes it very hard to play counter-attacking football, which the players that we have are quite well suited to, particularly when you're playing that with the free attacking midfield players to spring forward forward. So I think but that'll suit both teams. I think we'll see quite an open game at times. When they're not kind of pussyfooting around each other to try and work out who wants it more. We're at Stamford Bridge, so I'm confident, but I'm not cocky, if that makes any sense.
So there will be no parking of buses at Stamford Bridge. I mean,
well, I see. This parking of buses makes me laugh because, I think we got accused of doing that against Man City for the first 30 minutes, particularly, and I actually thought we were just poor. In the first sort of 25-30 minutes against Man City at the Etihad, and of course because there's this park the bus tactic, we were able to spin that off tactically as we were parking the bus. You're not Barcelona in 2012, so I don't think it's as required. I think certainly cautious, and I don't think we'll be going full tilt at it, but it's effective football, and I think we'll have enough to win at the weekend.
Okay, all right. We spoke, just touched briefly on the money aspect. Obviously, Abramovich, before the Arabs came in, sort of changed the playing field somewhat. You've done pretty well off of the back of his money, but managers have come and gone in that time. What do you feel? I mean, are you happy to have him there? I know that he's giving you a lot of money, but I know there's the 1905 movement are not happy with his plans, or weren't happy with his plans for the ground or something like that. I mean, is it a loving between yourselves and Abramovich, or is it sort of an uneasy, just sort of a marriage of convenience?
No, I mean, I think every Chelsea fan thinks that Roman Abramovich wants what's best for Chelsea Football Club, but I think that sometimes what Roman Abramovich thinks is best for Chelsea Football Club and what Chelsea fans think is best for Chelsea Football Club is different. I mean, that's the same issue that Arsenal fans have been dealing with in the last 2 or 3 years as, Wenger went trophyless, and was refusing to buy players. You had Arsenal fans that were very respectful of what Wenger had done for the club and the way the club was building and not spending the money, if you like. But then you also had a lot of fans, after the first game of last season, were people crawling for him to leave, and that, a change of approach was required. So it's always a complex relationship between them. Just to clarify, it's the CPO, the Chelsea Pitch Owners,
right?
Which is a group basically in the 80s and 90s. You might remember Chelsea. We weren't as successful. We didn't have quite as much money.
Under Ken Bates, was it, and Matthew Harding or something like that era?
Well, yeah. Basically, what happened was before Bates came in, the original owners of the club's grandchildren were running the club, but they'd run it into such a point where the debts were so much they'd actually sold the freehold to the stadium. Ken Bates bought the club for £1 and a massive debt.
Yeah, I remember.
And basically had to try and fight to get that freehold back so that the ground and the club wasn't, ceased to exist and sold off for very expensive London flats. So what happened was when the freehold was eventually, the crash happened in the early 90s, it was great for Chelsea because it allowed us to buy that freehold back, and basically Ken Bates set up a fund of shareholders that was owned by the fans to buy the freehold of the club and ensure that, the ground could never be sold off again. This, of course, caused a problem for Abramovich because he had dreams of Earl's Court or Battersea or, building a new sort of iconic, 70,000 capacity stadium. And he couldn't release the capital he needed from the club because of the fact the fans own the pitch, and we believe we wanted to stay at, and still do want to stay at Stamford Bridge, and it can be expanded. He tried to force a vote amongst the pitch owners, and that got quite ugly and dirty as a battle. I know the club certainly strained the relationship between itself and the fans when that happened, but the fans voted no, and the club have so far respected that, and now we're, stories are coming out that we're looking at redeveloping Stamford Bridge into a 60,000 capacity stadium, which is what the fans wanted overall. And there's lots of very anxious rugby fans worried that we're going to ruin Twickenham for a year for them.
Mm-hmm. All right. The FFP rules come in, and it seems as though you guys are toeing the line. I think not only would you say you won the transfer market in terms of the players bought, but actually the bottom line, the actual balance sheet figure, I think your net spend was pretty low, wasn't it? I can't remember exactly what it was, but in no small part helped by the Luis sale to PSG. Your net spend was pretty low compared to Man United's and Arsenal's. How have you guys managed to do it, and how is that going now? I mean, in terms of, your balance sheet and sort of, debts or whatever it is that you have on your balance sheet. How is that going? Has it been a strain on the club or not?
Well, first of all, I want to clarify FFP. It's no such thing as financial fair play. It's actually financial doping to protect the richest clubs in Europe and the largest clubs in Europe, which was set up to protect them. So basically to protect them from insurgencies such as that by Chelsea, and now clubs such as Paris Saint-Germain and Man City, which I believe have actually come to the party late. Chelsea have got in, spent the money, invested the money, built an infrastructure, and are now trading at break-even or profit. And we're not actually going to be affected by FFP whatsoever, which is evidenced by the fact that whilst clubs such as Liverpool, Man City obviously have already been are being punished by FFP, so far Chelsea have been unrelated. Now that's unaffected, and that's partly because we've been successful. I am going to again mention that we won the Champions League, which was very useful in that season to boost revenues and enhance the profile of the club for things such as sponsorship. Then we've also invested a lot in the youth and the academy, and we've adapted to the marketplace, and I'm not saying it's an entirely healthy way to be, but we have 26 players out on loan at the moment. It might be 25. Youth players gaining experience in Europe, but sales such as De Bruyne, Mata, Luis, for substantial markups, as well as bits and pieces here and there for some of the younger players, means we've got a sustainable model at the moment, which a lot of other clubs don't. In the long term, if we don't expand the stadium, we may find ourselves, struggling on the revenue a little bit. But, financial fair play was voted for by Chelsea Football Club because we recognised, Roman Abramovich, I think, recognised that it would actually protect his investment by preventing other people using their money and influence to do what he did. So whilst we may not be popular with clubs that feel it's a divine right to be successful and popular because they've been there and been successful in the past, yes, I am looking at Arsenal and Liverpool when I say that, we've got a model that's working, and I think, that's testament to the fact that we made a transfer profit this year.
For me personally, I don't care the likes of Man City and Chelsea have oligarchs and oil money. We've got an oligarch that we're resisting. I'm glad that we're resisting coming in and using his money and influence on the board. I welcome the competition. If people want to be, bankrolled by, single entities, that's up to them. More, fair play to you. You see that, football is a game that's played in the field. Whatever means you use to get successful is up to you. But going on to another question which is linked to this, we've got at Naturlig 1980 says, what is the idea of having 27 players on loan? Now, some people have said that it's there's something murky and untoward about that. I mean, I know that you could probably clear the air on the whole, is it Vitesse Arnhem situation in Holland or in the Netherlands, where you've got a number of players over there, and so I don't know what that's all about, but can you clarify the position of 27 players on loan, and specifically, and also the Vitesse Arnhem situation?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Vitesse Arnhem is, we were actually late to the party on that one. I remember when I was growing up, Manchester United always used to loan players to a club called Royal Antwerp. And I believe that was a similar type relationship. You look at what Man City are currently doing with, New York and Melbourne. So they now own football clubs wholeheartedly in other markets under franchise models that they now, buy and then loan out. And obviously, last weekend, one of those players came back to cause us a little bit of grief. But Lampard's still a legend. And so when we've got 27 outlets, because English football's broken as a youth development system. You know, the level of reserve team and under 21 football being played is not good enough to bring players through the academy successfully. And now we're competing on, you know, global markets for talent. You know, there's a real gap between being a promising 16 or 17-year-old and being an accomplished player. You know, out there. If you look at the players that Arsenal have brought through that have been successful, you know, if you look at the Jack Wilshires, Aaron Ramseys, they've either been bought for lots of money from clubs that have done that early development on them, and then you've taken them the next step, including loans. I know Wiltshire went on a
well, it's a bit
loans.
different from you. I think it's a bit different from you.
I'm expanding the argument out. Don't worry. I'm building to the point. So clubs are currently experimenting with what systems are going to work to help them develop the talent that they've got. Now, I'm not entirely comfortable that we have 26 players out on loan, but basically the club, like Arsenal are doing, like Man City, Manchester United, they're farming for talent. What they do now is you go out with a net, you capture up as many young talented players you can, put them in your academy, and then you see which ones come through. Something that's been happening, you know, for decades. Every school you go to has a couple of kids that have had a trial somewhere, or been in an academy somewhere that's not really come to anything. So what's happening now is we've adapted that model, and that means in order to give those players that are not quite ready for the first team, or we're not sure if they're ever going to be good enough, but have an inherent value, we're sending them out on loan to keep building that value. Look at Thibaut Courtois, one of the top 5 goalkeepers in the world. We bought him from Genk. We loaned him straight out, Real Atletico Madrid, you know, and, you know, actually played against us and put in a decent performance against us in the Champions League semi-final last year. But he's a classic example of someone. He wouldn't be the player he was now if he hadn't been on loan. Look at Matic. He was a player we had when he was younger. Admittedly, we sold him to Benfica as part of the Luiz deal. Ended up buying him back for £21 million, around that figure. And he came back one of the best players in his position in Europe. So the reason there are so many players out on loan is there's not a solution at youth level for these players. And, you know, it's a way of almost speculating on a stock market style idea of bringing talent through and making a profit from it. You know, we're making money off this loan system that we're using at the moment in loan fees and in the increased value of players that are getting top level football across Europe.
Can I? You use your comparison against with Arsenal and Liverpool and so on and so on and Man United, but to be honest, each one of us clubs have sent out players on, nurtured players, whether from our own academy or brought them in like you know, Aaron Ramsey for little money from other clubs, and they've come back and they've been successful. You can only really use Thibaut Courtois as your shining model of, you know, your example that things are working, that it's a successful system. I think we can both agree on that.
But I'm also going to point out Kevin De Bruyne. I'm going to talk about the fact that we sold Miroslav Stoch for money, the fact that we sold a number of players for significant levels of money, which then finance that system. So I'm not arguing it's a perfect system. I'm just saying that we're trying to find a solution to deal with things such as financial fair play, and this one seems to be working at the moment. So
it is a way, in part, of getting around the FFP, the financial fair play, or the financial doping system, as you call it. Because you can't have that number of players on your books, can you?
Of course you can. You just can't play them.
And that's a way of getting around it. I mean, okay, so you'd play. I don't know how many of those would be reserve players or in your first team squad, but I suppose players like Van Ginkel would have been first team squad player, and
he unfortunately had an injury that stopped him from being there. You look at Oriol Romeu, he's out on loan at the moment. He's had first team experience, but he wasn't quite there in the long term. You know, he had about 10-15 games under Andre Villas-Boas.
And these would have bulked out your balance sheet, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you look at those
your
players
expenses.
Still. Josh McEachran obviously had some time, but it's tough to get in Chelsea's first team. You know, the difference between a player that can play in the Champions League or in some of the top European leagues and can play for Chelsea is not that big, but it's a big difference. It's the difference between having a Danny Welbeck and having a Diego Costa. It's the difference between having a Rosicky and having an Eden Hazard. It's difficult. It's not easy to find the top players and bring them through and have them at the top of their game. We've got it wrong, and we'll continue to get it wrong from time to time. But by having more players, you have more chances of stumbling upon the right formula.
You would compare Eden Hazard's position as a player to Rosicky, not Ozil and Hazard, maybe. Would that be more comparable?
Ozil's a world-class player. I was talking about the fact that players that you've bought in for a lot of money that haven't happened.
Right. Okay. All right. It's just an odd comparison
on the field.
Right. It's just an odd comparison. But anyway, that's fine. All right. So I think we've answered that question, Chalig. So hopefully you're happy with that. Okay. So Sunday. Let's wrap it up. What's your prediction, scoreline, and so on?
My prediction, I think it'll be a tight game. I'm confident in the way we're playing and the style of football we've got at the moment. I'd like to think we'll win, but I'm not sort of. I would say I'm sort of 65-35 on we'll win. I think with the top playing against the top four, the important thing at the moment is not to lose. But then last season we got 18 points out of 21 against the top four. So what do I know? I think it'll be maybe I'd say 2-1, 3-2. It's going to be. I think it'll be quite an open game, and there'll be a few goals.
You're quite generous with that. I think you're quite generous with that. A lot of Gooners, well, I'd say a lot, but a fair few Gooners are a bit worried, even coming off the back of a 4-1 win against Galatasaray. A lot of Gooners are worried that, tactically and personnel-wise, we might come a cropper like we did last season. Me, myself, any kind of result is going to be a result for me. So a draw would be fine. Obviously, a win would be fantastic. Like you said, a few years ago, we came from, I think, 3-1 down to win 5-3 or something like that. So something fantastic would be great. But, any kind of a result, a draw, tight win for me would be great. But, I know a lot of Gooners are going there, with, filled with trepidation. Like you said, I think Chelsea this season look a much more well-oiled machine than they did last season. And as you said, you came pretty close then with no real strikers on fire. So now that you've got Diego Costa, who's arguably the continent's best striker on form at the moment, it's going to be a tall order. But hopefully, I'm sure it'll be a raucous atmosphere there, at the bridge, and it will be entertaining one way or another. I just hope that the referee doesn't send off the wrong player for us.
Well, that's it. And I mean, we haven't talked much about my thoughts about the Arsenal team and the balance. I mean, I think Man United and Arsenal are two teams this summer that have bought quite heavily offensively, but not really strengthened sufficiently in defence. I know you bought Young. Is it Luke Chambers?
Callum Chambers,
sorry. And he looks like he'll be a decent player. Whether he'll be consistent enough at his age right now to make an impact this season, is debatable. But he does look like a decent player for the future. Attacking wise, I'm not 100% convinced on Danny Welbeck. I know he's on fire, but scoring goals against Galatasaray and as part of a romp doesn't make a season. But you've got a couple of quality players in there, and as always, I think Arsenal, if you play well, you can give any team a game. But I think as the season goes on, it's how you're going to do against the smaller teams that's going to define your season.
I think, look, last season it was more a case of, over the last two seasons, it's been more of a case of our poor performance against the would-be top four teams. I think we've got one win in 18 games, or I don't know what the statistic is. We drew at home when we could have beaten Man City this season. Sunday, given the tall order, we've got to be looking at these games and getting something out of it, as I said previously. But we've got a fair few good players are going for. As you said, defensively we're a bit thin on the ground. in the defensive midfielder positions where, you know, we don't have the talent that we once did. But going forward, Danny Welbeck's looking promising. I'm sure he'll give, I know John Terry and Gary Cahill, they don't like pace. We've got, you know, Alexis Sanchez and also Mesut Ozil as well as young Ox. So going forward, I'm encouraged just defensively, and dealing with someone like, you know, players like Hazard and Cesc Fabregas and Diego Costa if he plays, and Schürrle, who's I think is very underrated for you guys.
He's a bit inconsistent. He's a very good player, and yeah, I think you're right. He's a bit underrated, but he can be a bit inconsistent.
Yeah, indeed. All right, Kristian, I want to thank you for coming on. It's been a really interesting chat with yourselves. I'm going to say, you know, may the best team win. And
let's get away with that one. We both want our teams to win. I don't care if we park the bus and score in the 91st minute from a offside goal. You know, I don't care. You know, it's just a derby. We want to win. I think we will. But it's been great speaking with you, Giles, and have a great enjoy the day, but not the result.
And I would like to return the compliment gesture to yourselves. Thanks for coming on, Kristian.
Cheers, Giles. Have a good one. Bye.